We are still on the third surah. That's Surat Al-Imraan. We're in the fourth juz'u by the help of Allah Ta'ala. And we're starting at Ayah 161. So the author says, starting with the word of God Almighty, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما كان لنبي أن يغل. And it would never be that a prophet would misappropriate the war spoils. So do not think that about him, because the prophets are impeccable. وَمَنْ يَغْلُلْ يَأْتِ بِمَا غَلَّ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And whoever misappropriates the spoils shall come forth with that very thing he misappropriated on resurrection day, carrying it around his neck. ثم توفى كل نفس ما كسبت وهم لا يظلمون. Then shall every soul be paid for what it earned of deeds, good deeds or bad deeds, and they shall not be wronged. They won't be deprived of any reward that they earned. That's the believer only. Kafir doesn't get any reward in the afterlife. And they won't be charged with any sin that they don't deserve. أفمن اتبع رضوان الله كمن باء بسخط من الله. Is it true that the believer who sought the acceptance of Allah is like the hypocrite who went back deserving the punishment of Allah? No, it is not true. Yani, is the believer like the hypocrite? No, he is not like the hypocrite. You know who's the hypocrite? The munafiq. He's the one who only shows outwardly that he's a Muslim while inwardly he hates Islam. Or he's doubtful if Islam is right inwardly, while outwardly he shows himself to be a faithful believer. That's the munafiq. That's something that the Muslims have to deal with. That's something that, yani, that's something that happens in our religion. I mean, that's amongst the things the Muslims have to deal with. That's because we have the right religion. And there are some people, they hate our religion, they hate our correct religion so much, so deeply, that they would pretend to be Muslims so that they could ruin our religion if they could from the inside, to infiltrate. They take advantage of the Muslims' niceness, and they take advantage of our obligation of judging the people by what appears from them, because we say we cannot know their hearts. We can only know what appears to us, what comes from their tongues and their limbs. وَمَأْوَاهُ جَهَنَّمُ وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ. And his abode is the pit of hell, that hypocrite. And what a bad fate it is, because that hell is an extremely hostile environment. هُمْ دَرَجَاتٌ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. Those who are rewarded and those who are punished, all of them are of varying ranks to Allah. Some of the believers are better than others, and some of the kuffar are worse than others. وَاللَّهُ بَصِيرٌ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ. And Allah is basir. Here means knower of what they do. Sometimes basir means alim, knower. And sometimes basir means al-muttasifu bil-basar, the one attributed with sight, seer. We mentioned that before. لقد من الله على المؤمنين إذ بعث فيهم رسولا من أنفسهم. By God, Allah was gracious to the believers, since He sent to them an Arabian messenger from amongst themselves. The first recipients of this Arabian messenger were the Arabs. He sent to them a prophet from amongst themselves, speaking to them in their own language. يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, reciting upon them God's verses and purifying them from the filth of disbelief. Or وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, or purifying them by taking the zakat from them, collecting the zakat from them. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ, and teaching them the book and the prophetic wisdom. That means the hadith. Teaching them the book and the hadiths. The hikmah, the wisdom, the prophetic wisdom is the sunnah. That means the hadiths. And the likes of this ayah here has been repeated in the Quran. This is a proof for the people of the sunnah that the Quran validates the hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But according to the so-called Quranists, who are hadith deniers, the hikmah is the kitab, the book. So, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, to them it means he teaches them the book, and that's it. Doesn't mean anything more. This ayah to a hadith denier doesn't mean anything more than that the Prophet teaches them the book. According to them, the hikmah is from the book. So it doesn't mean more than that he teaches them the book. وَإِن كَانُوا مِن قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. And indeed, the case is that they were previously certainly in obvious misguidance, clear misguidance, before the messenger came to them, teaching them what they did not know, reciting to them the verses of Allah, and teaching them the book and the prophetic wisdom. Yani, giving them a better lifestyle. أَوَلَمَّا أَصَابَتْكُم مُّصِيبَةٌ قَدْ أَصَبْتُم مِّثْلَيْهَا قُلْتُمْ أَنَّىٰ هَٰذَا أَوَلَمَّا أَصَابَتْكُم مُّصِيبَةٌ قَدْ أَصَبْتُم مِّثْلَيْهَا قُلْتُمْ أَنَّىٰ هَٰذَا. And is it that when an affliction afflicts you, believers, like the 70 of you slain in Uhud, that's the second battle, Uhud, after the battle of Badr. Is it that when an affliction afflicts you, believers, like the 70 Muslims slain in Uhud, an affliction that you had inflicted twice as much in the previous battle of Badr, when you killed 70 kuffar and captured 70 of them? Is it when this happens to you, believers, you say in astonishment, Anna hadha, how did this happen while we are Muslims and the messenger is amongst us? How did we sustain such casualties while we are Muslims and the messenger is amongst us? Because Allah Ta'ala could make the Muslim lose. And he could make the Muslims lose, though they didn't lose in this battle, like we said. Kuffar withdrew. The Muslims didn't lose here. They couldn't beat the Muslims, so they withdrew. But as you know, the Muslims didn't stick to the plan. So that's how they sustained such casualties. They didn't think that this would happen to them. So when that happened to them, they said, Anna hadha. When they were going back to Medina, they were just like, how did this happen? قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Say, Muhammad, it is the result of your own choices. Leaving to fight outside of Medina, though the Prophet preferred to stay inside. Or abandoning their post, the archers, that is, abandoning their post. Yani, before they went to fight, the Prophet ﷺ, he wanted to stay in Medina and let the kuffar come to them. But the Muslims insisted, let's go out to them and fight them. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he went and he put on his armor. And then he came back out, but his face was changed, as if he didn't prefer this. So when they saw his face, then they said, then we will do it as you want to do it, O Messenger of Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ told them, when a prophet puts his armor on, then he doesn't take it off without fighting. What this means is the prophets have a special rule. When they put on their armor, it becomes obligatory on them to fight. قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِكُمْ. قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Say, Muhammad, yani tell them, Muhammad, it is the result of your own choices, O believers. Or it's because of the archers who abandoned their post. When the Messenger ﷺ told them not to abandon their post, even if it looks like the Muslims are winning. So they disobeyed the Prophet ﷺ. Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. Indeed, Allah is over everything very powerful, very powerful. Qadir is more emphatic than Qadir, including creating victory and defeat. Allah has the power to create victory and the power to create defeat. So, subhanallah, it's important for the Muslims to be mindful, to be wise, and to be tactful, and to be intelligent, and to work according to normal means, also, and to rely on Allah, because if Allah willed, you will not be successful, even though you're a Muslim. And maybe Allah will make you successful so many times, and Allah will help you so many times, until the one time when you thought Allah Ta'ala would help you, and then let you lose. So we ask Allah for the protection, and we ask Allah for the victories. Ameen. What does it mean to work according to normal means? That means, I'll just give you an example that comes to my mind quickly without me thinking hard. What if a person has obligatory spending? He has to support his wife, he has to support his child, he has to pay his debts, for example. And he has enough money to do that. Or, yani, if he were to spend this money on something else, he won't be able to do it. So, should he spend his money on something else and then say, Allah will provide for me? Or should he say, it's very likely, it's very normal, in fact, if I spend this money in other than what I need to spend it on, that I'm going to fall short and I won't be able to do what I'm obligated to do? Yeah, so it's a good idea for him to say, let me go by normal means here and not spend my money on something else, and then find myself unable to fulfill my obligations. You understand the example that I gave you? Work according to normal means. So that's just one example. So use that. By that, you can gauge many, many, many things. Like if there's heavy traffic and you don't have the light, you have a red. The red is telling you to stop, and there's heavy traffic. Would you just say, maybe I can make it and run across really fast? Maybe it's not a good idea. You'd say, there's a high chance I can get hit by a car and even die. That's pretty normal. وما أصابكم يوم التقى الجمعان فبإذن الله. And what afflicted you on the day of Uhud when the two armies met? That was by the permission of Allah. وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And so that those who are believers would be distinguished as believers as he knew them in eternity. Talked about that. Yani, we talked about similar statement. It looks like it's saying, and so that he would know the believers. And he knows the believers. وَلِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ نَافَقُوا. And so that those who were hypocrites would be distinguished as such, as he knew them in eternity. وَقِيلَ لَهُمْ تَعَالَوْا قَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ ادْفَعُوا. And it was said to them when they withdrew. It was said to those hypocrites when they withdrew, come, fight for the sake of Allah, or at least defend yourselves. قَالُوا لَوْ نَعْلَمُ قِتَالًا لَاتَّبَعْنَاكُمْ. They said, had we known of any sensible fighting, we would have followed you. It's like they're saying, there's no chance here. Why would we fight? Had we known that we had a chance, then we would have been with you. هم للكفر يومئذ أقرب منهم للإيمان. They were to disbelief on that day closer than they were to belief. They previously had shown belief and did not expose any disbelief. But their response here, by their response here, they became suspicious, as if they truly had disbelief in their hearts. هم للكفر يومئذ أقرب منهم للإيمان. They were to disbelief on that day closer than they were to belief. Or it means their withdrawing from the Muslim army was a service to the pagan army. You see how the Quran can be interpreted? You see how the phrases of the Quran are, and they require explanation. يقولون بأفواههم ما ليس في قلوبهم. They say with their mouths what is not in their hearts. For if they knew of such a fight, they still would not follow you. If they knew that there was a fight with a sure victory, they still would not follow you. So they are saying with their mouths what they don't have in their hearts. وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا يَكْتُمُونَ. And Allah knows best about what hypocrisy they conceal. This nifaq, this hypocrisy, is very serious blasphemy. SubhanAllah. If somebody have this kufr in his heart, he's going to pretend to be a Muslim. He's going to dress like a Muslim. He's going to go to the masjid and make wudu. Wal-iyadhu billah, he doesn't believe in it. He's going to be making sujood and standing in the line with the Muslims. He's going to be attending the Muslims' meetings and listening to what they have to say, smiling in their faces. الذين قالوا لإخوانهم وقعدوا لو أطاعونا ما قتلوا. Those who said to their brothers, and they sat refraining from fighting, they fell back from the fight. قعدوا. Those who said to their brothers, وقعدوا, and they fell back. They didn't participate in the battle. What did they say to their brothers? لو أطاعونا ما قتلوا. Had only they obeyed us, they would still be alive like us, and they would not have been killed. قل فادرءوا عن أنفسكم الموت إن كنتم صادقين. Say, Muhammad, then fend off from yourselves death if you are truthful about caution preventing destiny. You won't be able to. You shall die sooner or later in one way or another. Caution does not prevent destiny. That's what came in the hadith. Innal hadara la yughni min al qadar. That's actually hadith of Ibn Abbas. Hadith of Ibn Abbas. Innal hadara la yughni min al qadar. Indeed, caution does not prevent destiny. But what do some people think? They take the other part that comes right after that. وَإِنَّ الدُّعَاءَ لَيَدْفَعُ الْقَدَرَ. And certainly, they say, the report itself says that Ibn Abbas said, indeed, caution does not prevent destiny. And indeed, supplication repels destiny. What's the meaning of this? Very important. The meaning of this is two different destinies, two different kinds of destiny, two different classifications. Because, there's something called qadar mubram. That means inevitable destiny. That's what we mean when we just say destiny, inevitable destiny. Even if we don't say the word inevitable or something that means that. But then there's something else, it's called pending destiny. Pending destiny. Qadar mu'allaq. Pending destiny is that Allah knows that if you make dua, for example, then such and such would happen. But if you don't make dua, then it won't happen. If you go right, then such and such will happen. But if you go left, then something else will happen. Allah knows. We don't know, and even the angels don't know. And Allah Ta'ala would reveal to the angels that if Fulan does such and such, then such and such will happen. And if he does such and such, then such and such will happen. And the angels don't know. They will go with their records. They have written in their records that this will happen or that will happen. They don't know which one's going to happen. And then they observe, and then they see which one happens, and then they cross out the one that doesn't happen. That's the pending destiny. Allah knows the inevitable destiny, and He knows the pending destiny. Caution does not prevent the inevitable destiny. But some things will influence, but there's also something called pending destiny. So what do you do? It's a very easy issue here. Don't be confused. What do you do? Just make the best decisions. And I remind myself, make the best decisions and think about what happens as a result of what you do. So if I do this, then probably this is what's going to happen. If I do this, then probably this is what's going to happen. And then make the best decisions so that you get the best outcomes. And use the knowledge that you have. to your advantage. Use this knowledge to your advantage. You know what the kuffar say? You know how they just recently tried to blow off Donald Trump's head on television for all of the world to see, but they missed. So, you know what the kuffar say? They say, Donald Trump, he was so close to being assassinated. He was so close to being assassinated. But you know what the Muslim believes? He was not even close to being assassinated. Why? Because it didn't happen. That means it was never going to happen. That instance when it missed him and only hit his ear and didn't blow his head off for all the world to see, that means at that time was never, ever, ever going to happen. He was so far from getting assassinated. قل فادرؤوا عن أنفسكم الموت إن كنتم صادقين. Say, Muhammad, then fend off from yourselves death if you are truthful about caution preventing destiny. Because what did they say? They said, لو أطاعونا ما قتلوا. Had only they obeyed us, they would still be alive like us and they would not have been killed. Not necessarily. ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا. And do not reckon those who were killed fighting for the sake of Allah as dead. This is an address to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or it's an address to every individual. Why are we saying that? Because we said that here because this verb is for a single individual. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ. Don't reckon, you individual, you one person. Don't reckon that those who are killed for the sake of Allah are dead. So who's this one who's being forbidden from this reckoning? So either it's the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, or it's to every individual one by one. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا. And do not reckon those who were killed fighting for the sake of Allah as dead. بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Rather, they are alive, with high status to their Lord, provided for. فَرِحِينَ بِمَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Jubilant with what Allah gave them from His generosity. That means very happy with what Allah gave them from His generosity. They are enjoying. وَيَسْتَبْشِرُونَ بِالَّذِينَ لَمْ يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ مِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ. And they have good news for those who did not follow them in death, and they stayed alive after them. What's the good news of those dead? Allah tells us, أَلَّا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. That there shall be no fear upon them, nor shall they be sad, nor shall they grieve. No, it doesn't mean they're saints. They are martyrs of the battlefield. Martyrs of the battlefield. الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Those who are killed for the sake of Allah, fighting for the sake of Allah. That's one of the highest ranks you can attain, as you know. For any slave of God who's not a prophet, the highest rank you can get is a saint. Or, the three highest ranks you can get as a non-prophet is a saint, a scholar, or a martyr of the battlefield. And if Allah is generous to you, He will give you all three. يَسْتَبْشِرُونَ بِنِعْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَفَضْلٍ. They have good news about an endowment from Allah and generosity. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And that Allah does not squander the reward of the good doers. He gives full reward for all good deeds, and no good deed is overlooked. Not a single one. Even just when you smile at the believer with a good intention, that the reward for that will not be overlooked. If you gave the believer a raisin as a charity, then the reward of this is not squandered. Not a single thing. That's important to remember. You might be an evildoer, a believing evildoer, but you still have some good deeds. Still have some good deeds. Don't think that you won't get the reward for your good deeds. Yeah, there are saints, for sure. There are always saints. There are 40 saints called the Abdal. The Abdal. When one of them dies, someone will take his place. There will always be 40 of them. Just those are saints. They will always be around. I'm not saying they're the only ones. I'm saying there's always going to be saints. الذين استجابوا لله والرسول من بعد ما أصابهم القرح. Those who responded to Allah and the Messenger to go back out and fight again, even after what afflicted them of injury. Yani, even though they sustained injuries, they hearkened to the command of God and His Messenger to go back out and fight again. Subhanallah. Very inspiring. That's how the believers have to be. لِلَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا مِنْهُمْ وَاتَّقَوْا. لِلَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا مِنْهُمْ وَاتَّقَوْا أَجْرٌ عَظِيمٌ. For those who did good among them and feared God is a grand reward of paradise. الذين قال لهم الناس إن الناس قد جمعوا لكم فاخشوهم. Those whom the people said to them, indeed, the army of the pagan people has mobilized to fight you, so be afraid of them. A man named Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud al-Ashja'i, he was tasked, and he had the job of going amongst the Muslims to break their spirits, to demoralize them, and to discourage them from going back out to fight. And possibly he had assistants going amongst the Muslims saying this type of talk here. فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا. But that only increased the believers in faith. وَقَالُوا حَسْبُنَا اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. And they said, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is enough for us, and He is the best to rely upon. فَانْقَلَبُوا بِنِعْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَفَضْلٍ. So they returned from Badr with an endowment of safety from Allah and generosity of Prophet. لَمْ يَمْسَسْهُمْ سُوءٌ. They were not touched by any harm of being killed or wounded. So this refers to the Muslims going back out for another skirmish. The kuffar, they made an appointment with the Muslims to go back out for another skirmish. So the Muslims said, we'll be there. So then when they went back out, even though some of them had sustained injuries, they went back out to fight again, and the kuffar had chickened out and they didn't show up. فانقلبوا بنعمة من الله وفضل. So they returned from Badr with an endowment of safety from Allah. Yani, they came back safe. Nobody got hurt. They went out to fight. The kuffar didn't show up. And wafadul. And they came back with the generosity of Prophet because they set up their tables while they were out there, and they made some money too. لم يمسسهم سوء. They were not touched by any harm of being killed or wounded. واتبعوا رضوان الله. And they pursued the acceptance of Allah by obeying Him and His Messenger. وَاللَّهُ ذُو فَضْلٍ عَظِيمٍ. And Allah is possessor of grand generosity. إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ يُخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاءَهُ. That man Nu'aym is nothing but the devil frightening his own hypocrite cohorts, not the Muslims. فَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. So fear them not, believers, and fear me if you are believers. وَلَا يَحْزُنكَ الَّذِينَ يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْكُفْرِ. And let not sadden you those hypocrites and pagan Meccans who rush into supporting disbelief. Don't be disheartened by them. Don't be disheartened by them. إِنَّهُمْ لَن يَضُرُّوا اللَّهَ شَيْئًا. Surely they will not harm the supporters of the religion of Allah in any way. They only harm themselves. يريد الله ألا يجعل لهم حظا في الآخرة. Allah wills to not give them any share of reward in the afterlife. This is the harm that they brought upon themselves. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. And theirs is a grand torture. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اشْتَرَوُا الْكُفْرَ بِالْإِيمَانِ لَن يَضُرُّوا اللَّهَ شَيْئًا. Indeed, those who purchased disbelief with belief, they took disbelief and relinquished belief as if they made a purchase. لَن يَضُرُّوا اللَّهَ شَيْئًا. They shall not harm Allah by their blasphemy in any way. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. And theirs is an excruciating torture. وَلَا يَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّمَا نُمْلِي لَهُمْ خَيْرٌ لِأَنفُسِهِمْ. And let not those who disbelieved reckon that our delaying them by extending their lives is better for them. Let them not be deluded by the fact that Allah enabled them to live longer and think that this is therefore better for them. إِنَّمَا نُمْلِي لَهُمْ لِيَزْدَادُوا إِثْمًا. We only delay them so that they would increase in sin. That's evidence that Allah is not obligated to do what is better for His slaves. God has no duty to do anything for anyone. And if He makes disaster befall you, then He is entitled to do so. He is not wrong. He owns you. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. And theirs is a humiliating torture. SubhanAllah. Look how Allah describes their torture. A humiliating torture, and an excruciating torture, and a grand, an enormous torture. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. I just read that. ما كان الله ليذر المؤمنين على ما أنتم عليه حتى يميز الخبيث من الطيب. Allah would never leave the believers in the situation of having hypocrites in their midst until He distinguishes the wretched from the good. I don't have some commentary here. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُطْلِعَكُمْ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُطْلِعَكُمْ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُطْلِعَكُمْ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ. And Allah would never grant you knowledge of the unseen so that you could know the hypocrite before Allah exposes him. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَجْتَبِي مِن رُّسُلِهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. Rather, Allah selects from His messengers whomever He wills. فَآمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ. So believe sincerely in Allah and His messengers. وَإِن تُؤْمِنُوا وَتَتَّقُوا فَلَكُمْ أَجْرٌ عَظِيمٌ. And if you believe and beware of hypocrisy, then yours is a grand reward. وَلَا يَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ يَبْخَلُونَ بِمَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِن فَضْلِهِ هُوَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ. And let not those who are miserly with what Allah gave them from His generosity reckon that their miserliness is better for them. بَلْ هُوَ شَرٌّ لَهُمْ. Rather, it is worse for them. سَيُطَوَّقُونَ مَا بَخِلُوا بِهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. They shall be collared by that zakat with which they were miserly on Resurrection Day. Collared, it means they shall be given a collar. When the gold and the silver become a serpent around his neck, biting his face, that came in the hadith. His serpent, his gold and his silver that he didn't pay, and he stored it away, so it's his treasure, and he didn't pay zakat. On Judgment Day, that gold and silver will become a serpent, and it will go around his neck, and it will bite him on his face, and it will bite him in other places too. And it has two knobs on its head. The snake has two knobs on its head. وَلِلَّهِ مِيرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And to Allah belongs all of what is in heavens and earth among what their occupants inherit. Money or otherwise. To Him, all of it belongs. So what is wrong with them for being miserly with what Allah possesses and not spending it for His sake? Yani, similar to the case of this one who thinks he can escape death. What is this person who doesn't spend his money for the sake of Allah think he's doing? He thinks he's preserving his wealth, preserving his money. He doesn't know that if he spends for the sake of Allah, then Allah Ta'ala will reward him, give him even more if He will. Give him even more than what He gave in the first place. So I remind myself. Yani, here this ayah is about zakat. Don't forget about all your other obligations too. Providing for your family, providing for your wife, providing for your children, your prepubescent children who don't have their own money. And don't be afraid of poverty. Yani, that doesn't mean not to be wise in your spending. Sometimes you need to not spend some money so you can stretch it, sure. But don't be miserly in such a way that you neglect spending this money for the sake of Allah. Don't be afraid to do that. I remind myself, sometimes maybe might be more challenging, yani easier said than done. Because you don't know where more money is going to come from. But who's that one? That's one who has little reliance on Allah. Wallahu bima ta'maluna khabir. And Allah of what you do is khabir, all knowing. Allahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. Any question? Ahlan wa sahlan, everybody. MashaAllah. Glad to see you all, see all your names, especially those names that I see all the time. So happy to see you. I hope that we will gather in paradise, inshallah. SubhanAllah. We'll all, inshallah, be in paradise, 33 years old, happy, looking good, living swell. Inshallah, you'll come over my place. We'll have a nice meal. I appreciate you too, brother. Yeah, Abdul Hadi, I think about you a lot too. May Allah have mercy on you and grant you what you ask for. Ameen. He said, does miserly just refer to zakat in all cases? No, because there's other monetary obligations. Or can you advise someone to not be greedy? Is that the same as miserly? No, it's not the same. Miserly is when the person doesn't want to spend. Greedy when the person doesn't care where he gets from. Greedy is when the one doesn't care how he obtains. Miserly doesn't want to let go. But one could be miserly, might be miserly, not just about zakat. Like, that's why I gave you some more examples. Like supporting your family, supporting your wife, supporting your children, paying your debts, also spending for the dawah efforts, giving money to the jam'iyah, for example. Well, you're asking me about English word greedy. So the greed, if you want, I'll look it up for you right now. Let's see. Greediness, ardent desire, ravenousness, keenness of appetite for food or drink, ravenous, voracity. Yani, it means like what I told you. He wants more, more, more. That's the greedy one. Like if you think about it in terms of food, what makes him greedy? Keeps eating and eating and eating all the time. If you're asking me about greedy versus another word, is now it's just going to be an issue of semantics. So you're asking me just about the word greedy in particular? Is that your question about greedy, or is your question about something else as opposed to miser? Uh, is it advise against being greedy? Well, when it comes to the food, yes. When it comes to acquiring money in any way without any care for how you get it, yes, it's advised against. That's haram, actually. For a person's heart to be so attached to the money that he doesn't care how he gets it, then yes, because that's haram. But it's not a bad thing necessarily to uh, want to make more money. That's not a bad thing by itself. Wanting to profit, that's not a bad thing in itself, even if it's big profit. And when it comes to not giving in charity, that's also advised against. to refrain from giving in charity when a person's able to. That's not good. But there's a story about one person. It was thought about him that he was a miser. It was thought about him that he was a miser. So miser is not good. When he died, they realized that he was supporting many families. He was supporting many families. So that's why he was so tight with his money, because he was managing it. So one might not know really what somebody has to do with his money. If we found a person who's not giving some charity, that doesn't mean we know why he's not giving the charity. Because maybe he gives charity and we just don't know. Maybe he doesn't want to give it while we see it. You could advise a person not to be greedy as a general advice. Yani, one might advise someone not to be greedy, not to insinuate that he is, though. One could advise someone not to be greedy, not to insinuate that he is greedy, though, but meaning to encourage him to be generous and charitable and selfless. Because some people, what do? They concern themselves with what other people do. And they shouldn't, because you don't know what other people might do. Didn't the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam praise the one who he gives a charity with his right hand in such a way that someone who's on his left side doesn't even know he's giving a charity? Someone who's on his left side doesn't know that he just gave a charity right there on his right side. So, so it's not, yani, we need to be mindful of our tracking what others do or what doesn't appear to us what they do. One person, there's one person, and he has a lot of issues with Jam'iyya, and he says, what do you do? What do you guys do? What are you guys doing? All I see is that you do this and you do that. If somebody told me he was talking this talk, then I knew really has a small idea about things, has no idea. Yani, that sounds like the talk of a show off, even. He wants to tell people what he does and what other people don't do in comparison to him. He doesn't even know. That sounds like the talk of the person who doesn't give on his right side without letting the person on his left side know that he's giving. Uh, sorry if my tone of voice. Yeah, Habibati. Yeah, Falti. Said poverty is not always bad, but should we still seek protection from it? Uh, you don't have to seek protection from the poverty. Let me just say, poverty is not dispraised. Put it that way. It's not dispraised. Poverty in itself is not dispraised. What's important that if a person wants money, that he wants it for the sake of Allah, not just so he can have money, rather so he can do his obligations, so he can, for example, support the students of knowledge so that they can study in the Mahad and study overseas, and support the Musalla so they can pay their electric bills and water bills. SubhanAllah. They have air conditioning in there. They have warm water in there. SubhanAllah. All right. Any other question, inshallah? Uh, you said, did I read Confessions of a British Spy? Yeah, I read it more than once. Do I recommend reading it? I do. But not believing that it's true story, though. I don't recommend that you believe it's true story. Just, you can read it. If you want, read it like it's a novel. Look at it like a novel and benefit from it that way. Ameen wa feek. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.